think that soon Saddam Hussein would understand that we mean what we say and that we back it up.
The U.S. and its allies send a clear message to Saddam Hussein, but he has one of his own.
Another battle has started, another jihad ordained by God.
The bombing has stopped, but is the standoff over? Tonight, Bush and Saddam, the final round.
This is ABC News Nightline. Reporting from Washington, Ted Koppel.
We begin with a bizarre footnote to this day's events, a strong indication that we learned about just this evening that Iraq might have prevented today's Allied attack, but apparently deliberately chose not to. At 12:25 this afternoon Eastern Time, the British news agency Reuters reported that U.S. and Allied aircraft had begun a military raid on Iraq. Only moments later, at the Foreign Ministry in Baghdad, Iraqi officials watched and heard the bulletin as it was reported on CNN. U.S. Navy warplanes took off from the carrier Kitty Hawk. Other American planes took off from bases in Saudi Arabia. British Tornadoes, French Mirages were also involved in the attack. Roughly a half hour later, shortly after 1 p.m. in New York, just after 9 p.m. in Baghdad, but a half hour after news of the raid had been seen on television in Iraqi government offices, the Deputy Prime Minister of Iraq, Tariq Aziz, called his ambassador to the UN in New York. According to diplomatic sources, Aziz instructed Ambassador Nizar Hamdoun to tell the president of the UN Security Council that Iraq was prepared to stop transferring its property out of Kuwait, and that it would also approve flight requests by UN aircraft to Baghdad. Only a couple of minutes later, Ambassador Hamdoun passed on the Iraqi offer by phone to UN Security Council President Yoshio Hatano of Japan. But of course it was too late. The Allied raid was already well underway, as the Iraqis clearly knew when they made the offer. Just one more curiosity in this extraordinary day. I'll be talking live with Ambassador Hamdoun a little bit later in this broadcast, but first, we are joined now by Dr. Richard Haass, who, as Middle East specialist on the National Security Council, is President Bush's top White House expert on Iraq. What do you make of that? Do you think there's a possibility that they might have been in a position to stop the raid? What if you had heard that message, let's say at 9 o'clock this morning? Would it have made a difference to you?
Probably not, for two reasons. First of all, from a phrase you've heard from other contexts, we're interested in deeds, not words. And secondly, the most important issue, and the proximate cause of today's action, if you will, was the situation in the South. And what it was obviously the Iraqi refusal to abide by the terms of the coalition's January 6th demarche, the placement of missiles and so forth in the no-fly zone. So again, speculation about a possible change of heart just isn't good enough.
Now, let me ask you about the scope of what happened today, Dr. Haass. Why so big or why so small? Either way, why this limited action? What was the purpose?
It's a good question. Let me answer it this way. I think it's important to keep in mind that the purpose of American foreign policy is not to use force. The purpose of American foreign policy here is to change Iraqi behavior, to bring about Iraqi compliance with the various resolutions of the Security Council. We thought the sort of action we took this morning was appropriate to that task. Hopefully it will persuade Iraq to comply with all the resolutions. If not, as both Marlin Fitzwater and the President made clear today, we retain the option to use additional force if need be.
Now, of course, you can retain the option. You, and I mean you, members of the Bush administration, only have a few days left in which to exercise the option. Is there a chance that we will be seeing more activity in the waning days of the Bush administration?
Again, I wouldn't want to rule it out. The decision really isn't ours. I think, quite honestly, the ball is in the Iraqi court. The coalition has spoken. The United Nations has spoken repeatedly. It's really up to them to decide how they will comply. They can comply voluntarily, which would make the use of force unnecessary, or they can refuse to comply with remaining resolutions of the Security Council, in which case they'll leave the coalition very little alternative but to, again, do something forceful.
The foreign minister of Iraq, in marked contrast to the more benign message that was passed on by the Iraqi UN ambassador, has made it very clear that they are not ruling out the re-emplacement of some of the anti-aircraft units in the no-fly zones. That would suggest to me that they either haven't heard your message or they don't take it that seriously.
Well, again, in that sense, the choice is up to them. Compliance is going to happen one way or another. I really think the question is how much of the compliance is coerced and how much of it's voluntary. But it's really up to Iraq to decide what sort of price it wants to pay.
All right, Dr. Haas, thanks very much. We'll be talking more with Richard Haas later in this broadcast, and we will be joined live by Saddam Hussein's representative at the United Nations, Nizar Hamdoun. But first, when we come back, how an eventful day unfolded, blow by blow.
This is ABC News Nightline, brought to you by Charles Schwab and Company.
If you're paying annual fees on your IRA, if you buy mutual funds and pay loads or fees, we have an investment breakthrough for you. Now only Schwab gives you the lifetime guaranteed no annual fee IRA and no load mutual funds from leading fund companies. Only Schwab gives you the single best way to buy mutual funds for your retirement. So if you're still paying transaction fees or loads,
maybe it's time to come to Schwab.
It couldn't have happened at a worse time for us. That's the week that we take more catalog orders on our 800 number than any other week of the year. No one could make it into work that day. AT&T saved the day for us.
We had designed their 800 service with such powerful backup features that within minutes they were able to reroute their calls to other sites around the country. They did a full day of Christmas season business and no one was there.
If you have a business that lives and dies by an 800 service, you go with the most reliable, and that's AT&T.
Are you using yesterday's makeup for today's face? Estee Lauder Research presents Lucidity Light Diffusing Makeup. It allows color to glide on, reflecting light away from imperfections. It moisturizes and protects in shades to match every skin tone. And Lucidity looks natural, even in sunlight. Now receive a free 10-day supply in your own shade with any Estee Lauder purchase. This week only in the Ladies Cosmetic Collection at Kastner Knott.
The Toyota-thon is over, but Volunteer Toyota still has Toyota-thon savings. Yes, while other dealers sell Camrys from $18,000 to $22,000, Volunteer offers brand new 93 Toyota Camry LEs for $16,400. These Camrys have power windows, door locks, tilt, cruise, stereo, and airbag. Plus, Volunteer Toyota has the largest selection in Tennessee. Don't look for these Toyota-thon prices on Camrys anywhere else, because $16,400 is offered only at Volunteer Toyota, Gallatin.
The Clintons, the first television interview since the election. Their hopes, their plans as they leave the State House for the White House. Primetime, Thursday.
It had been anticipated for days, and when the attack occurred today, it steered events from the Oval Office to Little Rock to Baghdad and beyond. ABC correspondent Jim Wooten takes us through this day.
Coalition aircraft at approximately 1:15 Eastern Standard Time this afternoon attacked surface-to-air missiles and associated infrastructure in southern Iraq.
Finally, officially, Washington's worst-kept secret was confirmed. 110 aircraft, all but a few American, struck at 4 Iraqi missile sites in the no-fly zone south of the 32nd parallel.
Additionally, there were some mobile SAM sites, generally in the Basra area and in the Talil area, that were also attacked.
Our planes are all accounted for. I've not yet seen a damage assessment or results of the strike, but they did the right thing, and the coalition did the right thing.
The right thing or not, he did it with less than a week remaining in his term on a day otherwise devoted to the rather ordinary tasks of a president on his way out. packing up the accumulation of 4 years in power, paying tribute to his predecessor, Ronald Reagan. But something more was in the air, and ABC's Ann Compton was looking.
Now that the Ronald Reagan ceremony is over, I was able to find Marlin Fitzwater, the press secretary, and ask him whether, like 2 years ago, before the military action against Iraq, all signs are that action is imminent. And he turned around and he said, no warning means no warning.
But on Capitol Hill, there was some warning from the future Secretary of State, Warren Christopher, appearing before the Senate Foreign Relations Committee and speaking for the president-elect.
We've repeatedly made it clear that we stand shoulder to shoulder with the current administration in our determination to make sure that Saddam Hussein does not miscalculate America's resolve again.
And Mr. Bush was getting exactly the same message from Governor Clinton himself, which was no surprise at all to ABC's Britt Hume.
At 11 a.m. Little Rock time, Governor Clinton received a call from President Bush informing him of the details of the plans that the Allies were carrying out in the Middle East. It is not entirely clear what all was said in that conversation, except that Clinton headquarters reported that the governor gave his full support to the president.
By then, the planes were already in the air, 35 of them from the USS Kitty Hawk, where those left behind were anxiously waiting. ABC's Mike Lee was aboard the carrier in the Persian Gulf.
Once the planes had been launched, it was about 3 hours and 40 minutes before they all returned. And in that time, the admiral came down to the press room, the captain came down, everybody was coming to see if we'd heard any news reports. They were all quite anxious. They wanted, above all, to have all their pilots come back, and then, secondly, to have them drop their bombs on target. And as they started coming back one by one, the admiral would come into the press room and say, well, we heard they're all okay. And he was like a father. I mean, they were like his kids.
Meanwhile, in Israel, a target of Iraqi missiles 2 years ago, there was no deja vu. And ABC's Dean Reynolds could measure the calm in Tel Aviv.
This time the Israelis are monitoring the situation, but there is no sense of tension here. They're simply waiting for the attack that they have assumed was going to get underway all along sometime this evening.
The United States and its coalition partners today took forceful actions against Iraq.
The bombing began officially at 1:15 Eastern Standard Time, 9:15 in Iraq. But the networks were telling America, and no doubt Baghdad as well, a few minutes before.
U.S. aircraft, as well as French and British aircraft, have begun to attack targets in southern Iraq.
At about 1:30, as ABC's John McWethy reports, the scenario took a strange twist.
Within minutes of the beginning of the air raid, I called Ambassador Hamdoun, the Iraqi ambassador to the United Nations, and he said he had just transmitted to the UN an amazing change of position on the part of Iraq. He said they would no longer bar UN flights over Iraqi airspace, and they would no longer create the kind of border incidents they had been doing for 4 of the last 4 days.
Back at the White House, Press Secretary Fitzwater, having already announced the airstrike, added a new ingredient to the already bubbling pot: ground troops.
The President has directed the deployment of a battalion task force to Kuwait to underline our continuing commitment to Kuwait's security and independence.
But half a world away, Saddam Hussein, unlike his own UN ambassador, was on Iraqi television talking about anything but security and independence for Kuwait, declaring yet another jihad, holy war, against the Allies, and telling his military that any Allied plane in Iraqi airspace should be a target. In Baghdad, ABC's Jim Laurie was watching and listening.
It's the kind of rhetoric that will go down well among the Iraqi people. Some believe he's trying to take their minds off the incredible hardships they are now suffering under UN sanctions. And if he can put their attention onto war and onto aggressors, then perhaps he will hold his country together a little bit longer.
But the Iraqi president should not expect any softening of American attitudes under the new American president, who was asked tonight if he really endorses the use of force in the Gulf.
Oh, absolutely. You can't rule it out, especially with regard to Iraq. There is a ceasefire agreement which that nation signed off on, and which they have regularly violated. So you can't rule out force. In effect, a state of war has been stopped only because of this agreement. So under the United Nations resolution, conflict is legal. It's a matter of international law. And he just, for reasons I don't understand, just keeps pushing and pushing.
And we'll keep on pushing, says Jeff Kemp, formerly of the Reagan National Security Team, unless the Allies get even tougher.
I think this is just a slap on the wrist when what we needed to give him was a bloody nose. He'll behave himself perhaps for a week or so, but he's not going to basically change his policy. And furthermore, I don't think a raid like this will undermine the power structure in Iraq, which should be our prime policy. So if this is all there is to it, I'm afraid it's not going to do very much.
But John Wallach, a Middle East specialist, believes today's airstrike isn't all there is to it, that it was not only ordered to teach Iraq a lesson,
but also to probe and to find out if this kind of military action could spark an internal uprising against Saddam Hussein. So far, there are no signs of that, but we may only be at the beginning of an engagement that may spin out over the next few days and perhaps weeks.
Governor Clinton is no doubt sincere in his expressions of shoulder-to-shoulder foursquare support for what Mr. Bush has done today. After all, he's insisted over and over that the country has but one president at a time. Still, today's airstrike and its consequences aren't going to end when the Bush term ends next week, and that cannot possibly be what the president-elect envisioned for his first few days and weeks in the White House. I'm Jim Wooten for Nightline in Washington.
Later in this broadcast, more of the story behind the story. We'll take a look at tomorrow morning's newspapers and what they'll have to say about the day's events. But first, when we come back, the other point of view from the Iraqi ambassador to the United Nations.
The defense calls Rebecca Carlson. You cannot get away with murder.
You don't have probable cause.
Sure I do. Marcia's will leaves all $8 million to your client.
The whole situation was unnatural. He couldn't handle it.
She got off under control. Walk away.
They can't wait to convict me.
All you need is a reasonable doubt.
Body of Evidence. Rated R. Starts Friday at theaters everywhere.
It may surprise you to learn who, over 30 years ago, was the first car maker to build cars with seat belts, to make safety glass standard, the first U.S. car maker to offer anti-lock brakes, and who today offers more models with dual airbags than any other manufacturer. That company is Ford Motor Company.
We're committed to making safety innovation an important part of quality.
Ford Motor Company. Quality is job one. It's working. It's working.
And certainly at this point in my life, cancer was the last thing I expected to hear. The choices I had to make were find the best doctors available and the best facility available. Well, I wish there was a word that was better than excellent to describe the treatment that I got at Baptist. I flew through it with flying colors. I left Baptist with a smile on my face, and I still have a smile on my face.
Hi, I'm Don Bergner with Thrifty Car Rental in Nashville. The changing seasons that bring shorter days and long winter nights are, well, pretty dull. But Thrifty has the cure for these wintertime blobs. Take a weekend trip, ski, play in the snow, in short, live a little. Great cars at low rates is what you expect from Thrifty. But the fun really begins when you experience service Thrifty style. So why stay cooped up all winter? Call Thrifty today and reserve a car to beat those winter blues.
In a special January series on the Believer's Voice of Victory, you need to know how the Word works.
So we're going to talk about the working Word. We're going to talk about what makes it work, how to work it. If we keep our attention on the Word of God, even though impossible things come, trouble comes, it doesn't say we won't have trouble. God just said, I'll be with you in trouble. And who's with you makes all the difference.
The Working Word during January with Gloria Copeland on the Believer's Voice of Victory.
You thought you had a great marriage until you find out your spouse is gay.
I said, Ed, are you gay?
It's happening to millions. 2020, Friday.
Joining us now from his New York residence is Nizar Hamdoun. He has served as Iraq's ambassador to the United States, as Deputy Foreign Minister of Iraq, and now as Iraqi ambassador to the United Nations. He is Baghdad's only senior official representative in the U.S. Last night on this broadcast, he expressed concern over an impending attack and even some disappointment. Now that it's happened, what is there to say about it? Has it changed anything?
No, I don't think it has changed things. Basically, again, the Security Council, on behalf of some of the powerful countries, dictating on Iraq some of the terms, just because it is a UN matter and Iraq will have to abide. And Iraq has done lots of compliance in the past on the different aspects of the resolutions. But there is also the no-fly zone, which has nothing to do with the UN business, which has been enforced by the coalition forces. So I think that has been with us for some time, and it will continue for some time in the future. Unfortunately, this is not going to lead to any cooperative behavior by Iraq, and from time to time Iraq will have to show up its resentment over this imposition of the zone.
And what kind of form would that demonstration of resentment take, do you think?
Well, to the extent that Iraq could, under its capacity. I don't think that Iraq really does consist any threat to anybody. But I think Iraq has all the right to show that it is a sovereign state, and that after all it has all the rights that are given to it by the UN Charter as a member state and by the international laws and norms. And therefore such kind of zones in the north and in the south, dividing Iraq into three spaces, cannot be tolerated.
Well, I suppose it has to be argued, Mr. Ambassador, and we didn't get into this last night, but let's for a moment or two get into it tonight, that the international community feels that what cannot be tolerated is the Iraqi government's handling of the Kurds in the northeast and the Shiite Muslims in the south. Your government has exercised extreme brutality toward its own people, and I suppose in the context of the war that took place 2 years ago, there is some worldwide feeling that it shouldn't be allowed to continue doing that.
Well, there is north, I'm sure you know that there is no control of the Iraq government over the whole area. I don't like to discuss things in the past. That's a very long story, which one doesn't like to get into it right now. But in the south, Iraqi government offices are there, and we are conducting the day-to-day business, and there is a control of the government on every bit of that territory. Why not allow the Iraqi airplanes to fly over that zone? I don't see that the situation right now needs or deems any military air attacks by the Iraqi government.
Let's see if we can go through a couple of points which have not only caused misunderstandings between the United States government and the Iraqi government, but indeed has now led our two countries into combat with one another on two occasions. Number one, Kuwait. I wonder if you could clarify for me what your government's attitude is toward the boundaries that have been established by the United Nations. The fact that Iraqis have moved on at least 4 occasions, and indeed moved in again today into Kuwaiti territory, raises some questions about Iraq's attitude toward parts of Kuwait.
Well, the issue that is at discussion now is the retrieval of the Iraqi properties from that zone. Iraq had reservations on the work of the demarcation committee of the boundaries over there, which I think has taken a very stupid decision to move the borderline up to the north and get half of the naval base and half of the Rumaila field to Kuwait. I think this is a recipe for troubles in the future.
So you're telling me that there is disagreement at the moment over the boundaries?
Yeah, I'm talking about Iraqi reservations because our voice was not heard in the commission. This is why we have boycotted the meetings. But that's a matter that's different and separate from the issue that is at hand now, the retrieval of the Iraqi property.
Now, when you talk about Iraqi property, and I don't think anyone is questioning that Iraq at one point, for example, owned those Silkworm missiles, But the United States government is taking the position, as is the UN, that they should be returned. Will they be?
Yeah, that has been really politicized, Ted. I mean, these materials are really not that significant. It's a matter of principle.
Well, it may or may not be significant, but my question is, are they going to be returned?
Well, that issue is now at discussion. We have told the Japanese ambassador, the president of the council today, and I've also handed just an hour ago in writing that same note that Iraq has stopped this operation and until we sit down and have an agreement with the UNICOM people on what to do about the property.
Let me just quickly, and perhaps we could just put up the headline of the New York Times. Tomorrow morning's New York Times has an interview with President-elect Clinton. And Mr. Clinton is quoted as saying he would not rule out renewing the ground war against Iraq. However, he's interested in hearing whatever President Saddam might have to say, and said, this is President-elect Clinton saying, that he wants to send the Iraqi leader a signal. I'm going to judge you, he said, by your behavior. I'm not going to sit around trying to figure out what is motivating you. Is that the kind of language you think that President Saddam will respond to well?
I think there is something positive in that he is ready, according to what you are saying. I have not seen the paper yet, that there is a will to deal or normalize relations with Iraq if Iraq is to do this and that. And that's, I think, a positive sign that we could sit down and discuss the outstanding issues and find ways out of it.
Is it your sense that some of the misunderstandings that have occurred have just been a personal animus between George Bush and Saddam Hussein, or is this truly the United States and Iraq which are having a great deal of difficulty in understanding and coming to terms with one another?
Yeah, I think there is some level of, personalized matters and the issues that have taken us into this whole war and crisis.
Ambassador Hamdoun, thank you again very much for allowing us to come into your residence, and thank you for staying up so late to be on Nightline.
Thank you.
We'll be rejoined by Dr. Richard Haas, President Bush's Middle East advisor, in a moment.
It couldn't have happened at a worse time for us. That's the week that we take more catalog orders on our 800 number than any other week of the year. No one could make it into work that day. AT&T saved the day for us.
We had designed their 800 service with such powerful backup features that within minutes they were able to reroute their calls to other sites around the country. They did a full day of Christmas season business, and no one was there.
If you have a business that lives and dies by an 800 service, you go with the most reliable, and that's AT&T.
At BASF, we don't make the meal, we make it healthier. We don't make the lotion, we make it smoother. We don't make the dress, we make it brighter. We don't make the carpet, we make it tougher. At BASF, we don't make a lot of the products you buy, we make a lot of the products you buy better. BASF.
You were on a Honda commercial a few years ago, right?
Yeah, they made me the Honda Family of the Year.
And how many did you have?
We had 10 over a 5-year period.
So now what happened? You switched to something else.
A Plymouth Voyager. I got in it and I drove it. I said, I love this thing. Comfortable, easy to drive, wonderful to look at. Take it for a drive. That's all I got to tell you to do. And once you sit in the seat, you find the comfort, you find the way it handles, you find its versatility, you won't buy anything else.
With over 3 million sold, Chrysler's minivans have been a part of more lives than all other minivans combined.
The Toyota-thon is over, but Volunteer Toyota still has Toyota-thon savings. Yes, while other dealers sell Camrys from $18,000 to $22,000, Volunteer offers brand new 93 Toyota Camry LEs for $16,400. These Camrys have power windows, door locks, tilt, cruise, stereo, and airbags. Plus, Volunteer Toyota has the largest selection in Tennessee. Don't look for these Toyota-thon prices on Camrys anywhere else, because $16,400 is offered only at Volunteer Toyota, Gallatin.
On the next Good Morning America, the latest from Iraq.
Plus a look at some of the best daycare in the nation and Matlock's Andy Griffith on Good Morning America.
We are rejoined now by Dr. Richard Haass of the National Security Council. An interesting admission there, it seems to me, by Ambassador Hamdoun, and I wonder whether you would be prepared to make the same admission in behalf of President Bush. These two men really don't like each other, that's no secret. But to what degree has that affected policy, do you think?
I think almost not at all. I know there's an American tendency at times to personalize foreign policy and to think that where individuals get along, good relations follow, where individuals don't get along, bad relations follow. But I think the differences between the United States and Iraq are so profound because of their behavior, and though in some cases largely because of Saddam Hussein. But I think any president would have felt as opposed to what they were doing as George Bush. I think what this president has done more resourcefully than others and more consistently than others, perhaps, is stand up to it.
What is it that Mr. Bush, that President Bush, was trying to achieve by striking now? And I don't just mean a few days before he leaves. He could have done it 6 months ago. There was just as much reason for it, just as much provocation. He could have picked any one of a number of things that the Iraqis have done that constitute violations of the UN sanctions and regulations. Why now?
What we'd had recently was a clear pattern of Iraqi violations. We had established a paper trail, a diplomatic trail of demarches to them. What you had was a violation that was such a clear act of defiance, there was no choice but to act. We're not, you used the phrase, why picking this opportunity? No one is picking it. I think we felt that it was, in a sense, forced upon us, and we had no choice but to react. It's important to show Iraqis that this type of defiance cannot be tolerated and will bring a price.
Let me ask you whether, in fact, it is your assessment that indeed President Saddam is paying any kind of price. No question that whoever his troops on the ground are who are under those attacks, they're paying a price. No question but that the Iraqi people are paying a price. But the high-ranking military officers, the intelligence officers, the security people, and Saddam Hussein himself, it could be argued, actually comes out of today's raid a little bit stronger than he was yesterday.
I wouldn't agree to that. They have clearly insulated themselves, if you will, from the day-to-day price. They have more than enough food, they have more than enough wealth, and so forth. But Saddam has failed once again to break out of his isolation. What you've seen, I think, is a remarkable demonstration that 2 years after the Gulf War, this international coalition remains robust. It remains willing to stand up to Saddam. It remains willing to use force against him. His entire line that with time the world will somehow forgive and forget, this line is just not working. And meanwhile, day after day, sanctions are eroding the ability of Iraq to do anything beyond its borders, much less within its borders.
But here again, he is now in a position to personalize this with regard to George Bush and the United States, and whereas disgruntlement might have been able to build up inside Iraq against Saddam Hussein, now he is going to be able to deflect that and say, you see, once again, it's that foreign devil, the United States.
Look, it's the oldest trick in the book for any leader who has failed dismally at home, who has failed dismally in his foreign policy, to try to come up with some foreign threat to explain his own shortcomings. Saddam has used this before. I expect he will continue to use it, but I think with less and less effect. Again, time is clearly not working. 2 years after the Gulf War, he has nothing to show for everything he's done except a currency that is orders of magnitude weaker, except for poverty, except for further destruction and isolation.
Let me flip that coin around, Dr. Haass, and ask you what you feel it is that the Bush administration has to show 2 years after Desert Storm in terms of what it has achieved. No question but that Iraq has suffered as a consequence of that war. But Saddam Hussein will still be in power next week after you folks have left the White House.
What we have achieved is right now, Iraq, 2 years after the Gulf War, is no longer a strategic threat to this critical part of the world, and increasingly is unable to threaten its own people. We have, if you will, circumscribed the sovereignty of Iraq and limited its ability to do damage. Right now, I would say Saddam Hussein and Iraq under Saddam Hussein, while a potential strategic problem, right now is probably only something of a strategic nuisance. It is not really a threat, and that, I think, is our great success.
Let's take a short break. When we come back, what I'd like to ask you about is the strategic policy of the United States, and obviously it has to continue. Something has to be handed on to the Clinton administration. As you talk to your counterparts, you have to give them some sense of what direction you are heading in. I'd like to get into that with you to the extent that we can when we come back.
It's the biggest appliance sale in America at the biggest appliance and electronics superstore. It's the National Home Appliance Sale at Sears Brand Central. America's favorite brands are on sale. Kenmore, GE, Whirlpool, KitchenAid. And many items are at their lowest price ever, like this large capacity Kenmore 6-cycle washer and matching dryer. Save $80 on the pair. Get to the biggest appliance sale in America, the National Home Appliance Sale at Sears Brand Central.
You can count on me, Sears Robot and Company.
Polyshades by Minwax. It's a stroke of genius. Polyshades is rich stain and polyurethane protection in one. Polyshades gives wood a beautiful protective finish in half the time. Polyshades by Minwax.
My glasses are so heavy. Can LensCrafters help?
You need LensCrafters exclusive featherweights. Lighter, slimmer.
They're so light and so comfortable. I hardly know I've got them on.
LensCrafters better fit for greater comfort in about an hour.
I pretty much thought all tartar control toothpaste were the same until I tried Arm & Hammer tartar control gel.
Introducing new Arm & Hammer Dental Care Tartar Control Gel.
It makes me feel like the dentist just cleaned my teeth. That smooth, polished feeling you get when there's nothing left but clean. Arm & Hammer is the only tartar control gel with baking soda, which my dentist recommends, and the fresh mint taste, which I love. So now I get that fresh from the dentist feeling twice a day and not just twice a year.
New Arm & Hammer Tartar Control Gel for that healthy, fresh from the dentist feeling of clean. Try it.
Before we go back to Dr. Haas, we've already taken a look at the New York Times scoop, its interview with President-elect Clinton. Here's a look at tomorrow's papers elsewhere. The Washington Post discloses that the attack plan was dramatically scaled back. It says the administration told allies last week that airstrikes would go on for 2 or 3 days and would include a target in Baghdad. The plan, says the Washington Post, was made low-key and quick to allow Bill Clinton some maneuvering room. The Los Angeles Times, meanwhile, says that the raid showed the vulnerability of Saddam's military assets, but it also pointed to a drawback in the short duration of the raid. Saddam, it quotes an analyst as saying, can walk away from this one smiling and stronger at home. Why don't we pick up on that one, Dr. Haas? Does he walk away smiling and stronger at home? You suggested not before.
No, again, I think clearly not. He once again showed his inability to defend his country. He once again has proven unable to break out of this diplomatic isolation. What this once again underlines, that so long as Saddam Hussein rules Iraq, the lives of the Iraqi people, the innate wealth of Iraq are going to be squandered simply to try to maintain this individual and his coterie in power.
What do you have to say about that Washington Post story? Kind of interesting. You folks were initially planning to go on for 2 or 3 days with these attacks and hit a target in Baghdad?
At the risk of disagreeing with a major metropolitan daily, it's not quite my recollection. Obviously, all sorts of plans are prepared for the president to review. Obviously, they were reviewed, but the idea that somehow we had something very large and then scaled back is not the case. What I'd simply say is that, yes, we did use a fairly modest amount of force here. We did want to send a message, and I think there's an important logic to this. It's very important that the focus here of the coalition remain on Saddam's behavior, and that's exactly where it is. I don't think we want to create a situation where suddenly the coalition is potentially troubled or undermined by a consensus that maybe the United States is acting too strongly, as somehow the United States has acted unreasonably. So I think there's a lot to be said for acting modestly, but as we said publicly, we clearly presented the possibility that we would do a lot more if need be.
As you sit down with your counterparts from the Clinton team who are going to take over the roles that you and your colleagues now fill on the National Security Council at the White House, what is the strategy that you tell them has guided U.S. policy over the last few years?
Well, the objectives are clear: to bring about Iraqi compliance with the UN resolutions, to make sure that Iraq cannot again become a strategic threat either to its neighbors or to its own people. I think the basis of that strategy, more than anything else, are the sanctions, to keep in place this regime that prevents Iraq from once again gaining strength. key to that is keeping this coalition intact. And that's what we've tried to do. It's a question of constant diplomacy, constant working. And I think what we've done is created an environment where over time Iraq's ability to pose a threat is increasingly diminished.
You have warned that there is a danger in personalizing foreign policy, but I think you know that a great many Americans do personalize it and indeed see Saddam Hussein as being so much a part of the problem that they raise the obvious question, why, as you discuss your strategy, is not the removal of Saddam Hussein a part of that strategy?
Well, I think in the case of Saddam Hussein, personalization does make more sense than perhaps normally. Anytime you have someone who is a dictator, he obviously exercises a greater influence over his country's foreign policy than, say, a president would in a democracy. So some personalization makes sense. And we have made it clear constantly that we think the world, the region, the Iraqi people, most important of all, would be a lot better off with an alternative leadership. The best way we know to help encourage this and to bring it about is to make it clear that so long as Saddam Hussein is leading Iraq, Iraq will never again be accepted back into the family of nations, into the region, will never be able to sell its oil and so forth. And I think that's the best inducement one can give for the Iraqi people to ultimately bring about a change in their own leadership.
In that sense, your long-range strategy has to be deemed, at least at this point, as you folks leave office, a failure.
No, again, Iraq is not able to pose a threat. I know people like quick fixes. I think over the last 2 years, we have helped bring about a situation where we have managed this situation and reduced the threat to American interests. Over time, I am confident that you can gradually help bring about a situation where you won't have someone like Saddam Hussein in power. But even after that, history doesn't necessarily end in the Persian Gulf or anywhere else. I think you'll just move on to a new chapter where you'll have to deal with a successor government, you'll have to deal with Iran, you'll have to deal with other threats to regional stability. So there's not going to be any permanent solution or permanent fixes here, though clearly the passing of Saddam would be a major benefit, I think, to everybody.
What about the presence of those U.S. troops in Kuwait? I gather, what, a brigade is going in, about 1,500 troops?
A little bit less. It's a battalion, a little bit less than that.
A battalion. What is the purpose?
Well, when we left the Kuwait after the war, we left certain types of equipment behind. What this is one of a regular series of exercises that marries up or joins forces that come over with the equipment that we left in Kuwait. I think it's an important demonstration that the United States is not only interested but able to come to Kuwait's defense if need be. And while you've had the sort of problems we've seen over UNICOM, over the observer mission on the Kuwait-Iraq border, while senior Iraqi officials continue to say that they do not recognize the independence of Kuwait, I think it's extremely timely, given the current situation, for the United States and Kuwait to exercise together and for us to demonstrate where our support is.
We've only got a couple of seconds left. Today's operation, is it your gut feeling that this is it? It's over for now?
Look, one thing I've learned over the 4 years dealing with Iraq, that my predictions and probably anybody else's aren't worth an awful lot. Again, I think the choice is really Baghdad's. If we have to act again, we will, but that's not what we're about. What we're really about is seeing them comply with the UN resolutions.
Richard Haas, thank you very much for joining us. I'll be back in a moment.
What exactly does the Maytag repairman do all day? It's probably not fixing washers and dryers, because we build them to last longer and need fewer repairs.
Solitario. I'm hungry.
So whatever old Lonely's doing, it's okay with us. Because the less time he spends doing his job, the better we've done ours. Maytag, the dependability people.
Tomorrow on Prime Time, President-elect Bill Clinton and his wife Hillary talk with Diane Sawyer, their first joint television interview since the election. That's our report for tonight. I'm Ted Koppel in Washington. For all of us here at ABC News, good night.
If you wish a videocassette version of Nightline, the cost is $14.98 plus $3.95 shipping and handling. If you wish a printed transcript, please send $4 to 1535 Grant Street, Denver, Colorado, 80203.
Nightline is a presentation of ABC News.
More Americans get their news from ABC News than from any other source.
Thursday, two great stars are back-to-back on ABC.
Somebody from your past, maybe.
Andy Griffith returns to series television.
So you just call me anytime.
As Matlock. Then Hal Linden returns in Jack's Place.
Wishes can come true.
Abracadabra.
The magic is back. Matlock and Jack's Place back-to-back Thursday.
Ann Holt and Channel 2 News on your side.
Tonight on Hardcover.
I think there are more lies.
Mia Farrow's lawyer accuses Woody Allen of sex with Soon Yi while her little brother and sister watch.
I have a wonderful 7-year-old daughter who's driven and brainwashed to say these things.
The question now, as Connecticut police decide on